So if you're just joining us, we're just hanging out before the webinar. There's a poll up here, so take this. Let us know if you're using any AI technology. Sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it, but if you're consciously or proactively actually seeking out AI technology to personalize the buyer journey, that would be your yes, no. And then if you just don't know, throw us a not sure, and then we'll share those results as we get into it. But yeah, we're just kind of hanging out. We were talking, Kyle lives in Maine in the kind of the middle of nowhere. So we were talking about his satellite internet, which liked to drop every 8 minutes, which isn't ideal for all the Zoom calls we've all been on for the last year and a half. And then a porcupine attacked his dogs last year.
Yeah, good times. It's like the questions you didn't know you needed to ask going into certain things, you know?
We're having like coyote attacks in like Newton area, and I mean, we don't have any pets, so it's not for us, but we're part of these like, community board, neighborhood board things. And people are posts like, be careful, a coyote attacked my dog this morning or last night. It's been pretty frequent, which is interesting because it's not super wooded around here. Like, I'm not sure where they're coming from, but I guess they're rather aggressive. So no porcupines, but
Maggie's jumping on the chat saying they're just dealing with hedgehogs in the UK, which I don't think, other than Sonic the Hedgehog, the video game, I don't know that I've ever actually seen a hedgehog in real life.
I have some friends who have domestic hedgehogs.
Is that right?
And they enjoy them a lot. Yeah, they're big fans. I find people who are hedgehog people go in deep, in my experience.
The one we'll get off of the animal thing in a moment as we start this webinar in 1 minute, but I still remember we went to, I think it was in Amsterdam, and I was there with my family, my little kids, and the last exhibit, like which you think is going to just be like the biggest thing, the best thing, was raccoons. And I remember telling my wife, I'm like, what? Like raccoons are a big thing here? Like they're hard to find, that they're the final exhibit? And I just kind of assumed, like in the US, raccoons were just everywhere in your garbage and like, pain. But it was kind of crazy to see in Amsterdam. It's an amazing zoo. It was one of the most beautiful zoos in the world. And then we ended with the raccoons. I was like, that's pretty fascinating. And you realize like the difference between like, people have hedgehogs and porcupines, and depending on where you are in the world. Has nothing to do with AI technology and marketing, sales, and creation.
No, we're keeping it, analog before getting into the AI thing, just to keep everyone on their toes.
All right, so people are still rolling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll leave this poll up for one more moment as we're kind of doing the introductions, but be sure to give us your answer to the poll. But Aurelia, if you want to get us rolling here, welcome to How to Align Marketing and Sales related to Conversational AI. I am your host, Paul Raitzer. I'm going to hang out here for a moment to start and do some quick introductions, and then I'm going to bow out and let Kyle and Aurelia do their thing. So let's, with that, get to introductions of Kyle and Aurelia. How you guys doing?
Good. Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, Kyle and I are old pros at this. This is probably about the 5th or 6th time Kyle and I have done a webinar together. Aurelia and I have not done one together, so I'm really looking forward to spending some time with her and hearing what she has to say on the conversational side. She's the director of product marketing, and Kyle is the director of business value. What is director of business value, Kyle? I think we've talked about this before, but tell me what your focus is in that role. That's a title you don't see that often.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Aurelia and I talk about this all the time. If you think about, how companies typically tell a story, it's, why we exist, and then, how we do what we do, and then what we do. And so as the director of business value, I make sure to quantify the value of how we do what we do. And so I work with our sales organization, our customer success organization, to make sure that we are articulating how Drift delivers value to an organization across some of the obvious things and then some of the not as obvious things, and how to measure it and quantify it and make sure we're pacing on schedule for delivery of the value that folks bargained for when they started working with us.
Which is a great perspective for conversations, webinars like this, because so often we teach people like, you don't need AI for AI's sake. You like, don't go looking for AI, go look for tools that are smarter than what you're using, that create value, that can solve problems more efficiently. So it's always cool to have the perspective as we're kind of going through this. And Aurelia, how long have you been at Drift?
I've been at Drift a little over a year and a half, and have been in product marketing since, working with Kyle probably from day one. And Our team is growing, but really, tight collaboration, obviously, in with what Kyle does of thinking about us as sort of the voice of the customer and being the intersection across marketing, sales, and product of how do we talk about the problems that we solve as a business, that our solution, Conversational AI, our products solve, and how does that, resonate? How do we tell that story to our prospects and customers in a way that resonates with them, right? It aligns how we can help position to solve their problems, the value we'll bring them, and making sure that that story is aligned to the messaging and positioning, right? Based on what we know is happening in the market, what we know customers and prospects want, et cetera.
That's great. And I think it'll be really cool to hear your perspectives as well, because Drift is one of the platform companies that we've looked at that has taken in a way a leadership role in the integration of AI, but also in how to position it in the marketplace. There's always this hesitation on the vendor side to talk about AI in their product because the buyers, the marketers don't necessarily understand what that means or what the value prop related to it is. So I think Drift's done a really good job of gradually bringing more and more of that messaging to the market to differentiate the platform from the other solutions that might be out there, but without just like coming out and touting AI. Because again, it's not really what it's about. It's a smarter way to do conversational. So
yeah, it's a core piece of our platform. And Kyle and I will kind of get into that, and you'll see across how it really hits and is used, right? Underlying so many things. But I totally agree. It's one of the reasons I joined Drift. I'm a geek out on this kind of stuff. I was like, there's so much opportunity here, and this is an amazing product. And so excited to talk more about it.
Very cool. All right, well, I'll go through a couple quick slides on the Institute. So, at a high level, the way we look at the industry moving forward is whether you proactively seek out AI tools and knowledge or not, it's going to become integrated into everything you do. So much like your consumer life, where it's just infused into Netflix and Spotify and Google Maps and Alexa, and all these technologies wouldn't be possible without AI. That's what's going to happen in marketing and sales. You're just going to see the technology doing things that was previously unimaginable, but we're still in the very early stages of that. And so the way we look at it is marketers and salespeople have the opportunity now to proactively seek out this knowledge and these tools that maybe their peers and competitors don't know to look for yet, and to get a head start. And so when we get to that point where it's just almost integrated into everything we're doing, you're so familiar and comfortable with the technology, and you're in potentially years ahead of the rest of the market because you moved first and kind of got that knowledge. So our mission at the Institute is to try and make this stuff make sense to you. Try and make it, in simple words with tangible use cases and technologies that you can look at something and the next day actually go take an action on it. Make this stuff make sense so it's not a bunch of technical jargon. And the monthly webinar series that we're doing here today is really one of the key ways we do that. So we have these free webinars, 1 or 2 a month, where we bring in industry leaders and have them talk about what they're doing, their perspectives, to help you, whether you're just getting started or you're kind of more at the intermediate or advanced phases of applying AI and really scaling it in your organization. That's what these webinars do, and they are available on demand. There's a bit.ly link there you can grab. And with that, I'm going to bow out. I'm going to watch Q&A and chat. We will do live Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, go ahead and post them in. But we'll be watching the chat and the Q&A throughout. And in the meantime, I'm going to shut my video off and turn it over to Kyle and Aurelia to do their thing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Kyle and I, as we said, are super happy to be here. So we have a jam-packed, though it doesn't look like it, but great discussion and agenda here. So we're going to start off talking a little bit about what really stands, between sales and marketing. I know we've all talked about the sort of finger pointing between teams. And actually I sit on marketing, Kyle sits on sales. We work together all the time. There's no finger pointing, but what's really what's standing between there, aligning, and then how you can really use conversational AI to bring these teams together and create that really personal experience for your buyers. And then we'll wrap up and share some of our takeaways, and would love to hear from the group for some takeaways as well. And then feel free to obviously drop any questions, comments into the chat as we go, and we'll make sure to leave time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I'm going to kick us off. This probably is no surprise to anyone, right? Almost everyone we talk to is concerned about personalizing the digital customer journey, right? Especially post-COVID, when so much is happening now digitally. And we see that like over 65% of buyers are more likely to buy from you if you deliver this really personalized experience, right? If you recognize them when they're on your website, if they're remembered and you greet them when they're returning to your website. And then if you're giving them the help that they need or the relevant recommendation to the right content, the next step that they should take. And we're already seeing this change, right? Because it's so important. On the marketing side, right? We're doing persona-based content. We're doing targeted ads. We're doing custom offers. We're organizing our team by vertical and segment and buyer personas. And same on the sales side, right? They're segmenting their teams by vertical, by role specialization. So this is already happening. But and from the website side, right? As marketing, it's something that's owned by marketing today. We're creating, most websites you'll see out there have this like self-navigation orientation, right? Where depending on how I identify myself as a visitor, whether that's the size of my business, the industry I'm in, the department I work in, the geography I'm in, right? What vertical, I can, get around and find what I need to do. But that's really not enough, right? It's still not the personalization that buyers want. And we see this, and it's reflected in the business impact, right? 1% of all of the traffic that comes to your website will only 1% will talk to sales, right? There's so much that marketing spends on top of funnel to bring the right leads and buyers to your website. And then only 1% of that gets to sales, right? And then on top of it, for sales, it takes 18 or more calls or emails to book a single meeting. That is so much wasted time for reps, right? They should be focusing on closing deals. And we'll talk a little bit later about how AI can help reduce this number of 18, down to, 6 or 8 steps, hopefully. And in addition to the business impact, right, it's not great on the website efficiency for your customer experience either, because even though I can navigate and say, okay, I think today, I'm in this geography or I work in this vertical, there's still so much. I mean, we saw that screen, there's so many ways I can go, like I don't know what I should do to find the information I need. And so we see that reflected for, the buyer coming with questions and we're missing the opportunity to even answer them. And we'll get into that a little bit. Not having that personalization, right? An experience based on me recognizing who I am, as we saw in that stat, or if I'm a return visitor, knowing who I am and addressing me in a different way. And it makes it just slower, right? And more friction to buy. And this is going to get even harder. And Kyle and I will touch on this a bit later as well. But, we all know with third-party, cookies going away, that is the way and first-party intent data that most companies today, marketers and sales, are using to personalize the experience. And so this is what makes conversational AI even more relevant, because we need to think about, as businesses, new ways and better ways to personalize the experience, especially with these changes with cookies and other types of data. So what's the solution to this? Well, it sounds rather simple when I say it like this, right? Sales and marketing has to share the responsibility for revenue and your website. So the way that we do this is conversational AI. And I'm going to hand it over to Kyle to start taking us through a little bit how conversational AI can help us do this.
Yeah, thanks, Aurelia. And can you pull me back to the slide about sharing on the website? Because I want to have some conversation on it. I think this is really interesting. And I love the story you told, Aurelia. I think it's verifiably true and happening outside of the market. But I don't know that everybody has always thought about conversational AI as like a personalization engine in that way. And so that's kind of I think that's an interesting way, or a helpful way, to think about what you're doing with chat, which is adding that dynamic layer to what otherwise is a fairly static experience. And that's how I think about it from like a website standpoint. But then I think this slide is very interesting. It's like, you mentioned at the beginning, right? You're in marketing, I'm in sales. There's not a lot of finger pointing. And I think the trope of like sales and marketing in a room yelling over, I don't have enough leads, or like, how do you know you're not even calling them, is kind of played out a little bit. Like, I don't know that that's happening. I don't talk to a lot of sales and marketing teams where like that's like cats and dogs, the way it's often portrayed in kind of an overly simplified version of it. But I think the way that is manifesting right now is, is more of the buying journey becomes digital, if that remains solely marketing's domain, well, sales is going to get squeezed out of the process. As if everything's about the website and everything's digital, and we used to own it, like marketing might have owned it only to like brand awareness, then owned it to lead, then qualified lead, but now pipeline, and now marketing is expected to influence revenue. It's like, okay, well, like where does sales participate? So it's not about like marketing owning more influence all the way to revenue, but the sales team now needs to think about how do they make themselves more digitally relevant, and how do you engage with people before they become qualified? How do you help them learn? How do you help them understand? Or how do you use technology to represent the things that the sales team cares about and create those automated experiences on the website? So that's some of the context through which, or the lens through which we think about conversational AI and its role in aligning sales and marketing. I don't know, really, what do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. And I love, right, like the website is now, I think traditionally has been something that's, falls in marketing and is like on marketing, but really, as Kyle said, as you said, like it's now that the shared area between, it's as sales comes up the funnel a little bit to understand what their buyers are doing. And when sales and marketing comes down to closer to revenue, right, that the intersection of where you really meet, where they can meet now is the website. And it's because we should always, both teams, and we are, at Drift, but in general, focused around the customer and our buyer. And that's where they're coming, right? They're coming from whatever, all these other digital channels, which is, of course, important to personalize on those, but all the marketing work that they're doing is to drive to the website, right? And if we know, I think there's some really interesting stats of, buyers are doing over like 65 or 70% of their research online, right, before they talk to sales. But those are really important nuggets for an insight for sales to know. What are they researching? What are they asking about? So that you can really personalize the sales experience for that buyer too, to have a more efficient sales process, better experience for the buyer. So I know we'll get into all of that. So I'm jumping ahead a little, but I think that's spot on.
All right, let's get into it. Okay, so we'll talk about conversational AI, and I really just bring up the left side of the equation here as well. Okay, cool. So if we think about like what, I really had a great slide, I thought, of the types of personalization that exists in marketing today and the types of personalization that exists in sales. So again, these aren't new things. These are things that people have been doing for some time, for years, in fact, of creating personas and content for them, and different specialized sales teams and motions, the SDR, the BDR, the strategic rep, the growth rep, things like that. So if you think about those two things, on the left-hand side, we have audience identification and targeting. Basically, who is on your site, where do they come from, and what page are they on? And this is all can be known through a smart conversational AI system that integrates with the data sources that contain that information in your environment. And on the right-hand side, you have a known set of resources, online and offline, that you can offer visitors depending on what it is that they want. And you have, for sales, you might have demo videos, an SDR team, or an account rep. In marketing, you have top of funnel content, middle funnel content, end of funnel content. And in service, you have a knowledge base, you have articles, you have videos, you have a support team. So there's all these resources. You know what those are. Those are defined and known within the business. So as we build this slide, the role of conversational AI is at its core a personalized matching function. And you accomplish this by thinking around, okay, now if I know who's on the site, how do I greet them? And how do I engage them with something that's going to be relevant? And then once the conversation starts, that's where AI takes over to understand explicit intent. And if you think about some of the more logic governed chat experiences that have, that Drift does and others do, and that have become very popular in the marketplace, you're actually asking for approximate intent. You're giving people three options. It's typically, hey, what brought you to the site today? I'm an existing customer. I want to talk to sales. I'm just browsing. And that aligns roughly with the three categories of resources you have on the right side of the equation. And folks kind of select their way to approximately the right thing that they're looking for. Well, when you change that or upgrade it with an NLU or an AI-based experience in your classifier, you go from understanding three approximate intents to 100, 150, 250 specific intents of exactly what that customer is looking for. And then the final piece that brings us all together is having chat experiences that are dynamic. Like basically what then happens after you've answered the question or provided a content relevant to the intent that was expressed, you change the experience to make a recommendation of exactly what that customer should do next, the exact piece of content they should read next, the exact rep that they should talk to, the article to give them the help they want in support, or instructions just right in line within the chat. And so that's the role of conversational AI, of aligning sales and marketing. It's the way and the path and the work done by marketing to get someone to the site in the first place. And then exactly what should happen on the sales side. We need to understand intent accurately in the middle to make the right recommendation and provide a great customer experience that bridges those two things and what is otherwise a static website. So that's the framework. That's how we think about that. I don't know, Aurelia, how would you comment that?
Yeah, I think what I love about, or what I think is so important to the personalization piece is what you said on the like discrete intent that you're understanding. So we're not, saying a pick list of options. It's now a free text to say, how, Kyle, what are you looking for? Answer in your own words. And, as a marketer, that gives me so much more data to understand what's the words and messaging that our buyers use. Like, how do they think about things? What are the questions that they really want to ask? So not only can you obviously create a really personalized experience in that moment for that buyer, but then you can use that insight, which we'll get to later, to really even tailor all the top of funnel content that you're doing to optimize your website even more, right? To be even more personalized in different areas. And I think that's like, not to nerd out too much in our own like AI, how it actually works, but it's also understanding these different topics. So you can say something a different way, right? And it's going to understand that. So we can understand like, what is the same intent or same type of thing? Like you want to talk about a pricing question, but asked 15 different ways. That's really insightful data for us. But also then obviously understanding that, creating that personalized experience. So, I mean, that's the piece to me that I feel like, as you think about cookies and this other data, or other ways to try to identify and personalize, that AI really differentiates as a sort of underlying solution to it.
Yeah, exactly, Aurelia. And let's talk to the next slide too about some of the value of this. So as the value guy, this is the thing that I love talking about, because as Aurelia mentioned up front, nobody argues with the idea of creating better personalized buying experiences. Rarely have I talked to a marketer in the last 5 years that was like, I really want it to be the same for everybody. But I do notice that when we're talking about personalization, can be an inherently subjective idea. How do we know when the website is more personalized? Like, when do we win? When do we party and high five because we did it? We can say, we did it, guys. Like, the website's personalized now. And how do we measure the value of that? And like, how do we know if our subjective idea of more personalized buying experiences is actually delivering results within our business? And so in our zeal to answer this question, we analyzed results across 5,000 Drift customers. And I'm here to confirm for everybody what they already think, which is that, yes, you do in fact get more revenue, more of the dark money that lives on your website, but doesn't fill out a form and convert today, as you progress down a journey of creating ever more personalized buying experience in the site. And so it works like this. We have a 4-blocker that we use to kind of bucket the way folks have deployed conversational frameworks on their website. And if you look on the far left side, you can think of that as, okay, I have a simple chat available on a few pages that greets everybody the same, like, hey there, how can I help you today? So those businesses will generate leads. They will convert revenue. And these aren't exact numbers. I basically reduced them down to a common denominator to show relationships. But if a basic approach to chat delivers $1 million in pipeline that is converted through the chat offer on your website, if I now make relevance or personalization to the page that I'm on, right? So a pretty basic step up from one chat experience for everybody. And I have a pricing page experience, I have a product page experience, I have a home page experience, I have experiences on different content within my sitemap. that will actually quadruple the amount of revenue on average that businesses are able to source via their website and via chat by simply creating personalization to the page that I am on right now. If I take that a step further in what we call an advanced deployment, now I am referencing intent data. And I don't mean intent like conversational intent data, but what page were you on before here? What search term did you use to get to the site? What campaign are you associated with before you got here? So I'm now locking into the path that you're on and what you've been doing before this experience that brought you onto the site right now. And if I can be relevant to that, then I'm going to double my pipeline again. And finally, if I have persona-based outcomes, the stat that Aurelia showed from Accenture, the 65%, if I'm able to actually make recommendations, because I know you've been to the site 3 times, you chatted about these other things the previous time we were there, and I know you've already read this piece of content. So now I'm going to recommend this because you and people at your company have found this very valuable. That maximizes the kinds of results that you can get through your website. So the punchline is that if a basic approach to conversational marketing delivers 1 million in pipeline, then taking something to the extreme and creating a more strategic approach delivers almost 10 times the results in terms of economic output from your website by advancing down this maturity model and delivering depth of personalized experiences on the website. So I think this stuff is fascinating, and I think it answers the important questions of how do I get my company to care about our website personalization initiative. And the final comment I'll say, really, and then I would love to get your thoughts on this, is what's the role of AI in this? Because I'm talking about personalization from a targeted standpoint. So AI breaks the tie between a classic conflict that we see as folks want to advance down this journey, where marketers want every single page to be conversion ready. If it's up to them, people would be able to qualify and become an MQL or a lead. They can pass the sales from every single page in the sitemap. Well, the sales team has to work those leads. And so what they want is high quality. And they want to make sure that they don't get overwhelmed with leads and forms or chat leads or CQLs that are not going to go anywhere or be unqualified. So through the mechanisms of AI that we're going to get into in a moment here, of better capturing the higher intent traffic and then actually disqualifying and blocking some of the folks that are patently unqualified or existing customers from going to sales, we're able to thread that needle, break that tie, and allow people to create these conversational experiences all throughout the website. So it's the technology that enables advancement down this journey of like personalized targeting and buying. So I'd love to hear thoughts. I haven't figured out how to read the Q&A while I'm talking, so I'm going to check here because I think there's some comments that we can address. And really, in the meantime, what do you think about this? And how do you, from the marketing side and the PMM side, how do you think about this?
Yeah, I think, I also want to ask you a question, like for the group, and I can answer, but, should every company, be aiming for strategic, or is it okay to be, in generic or basic? How do you, what do you recommend, or what have you seen for, with some of our customers, how they've progressed or where they started?
Yeah, so I think you absolutely need to meet folks where they are on this. And, I talked to some businesses that have never put chat on their website ever, and they're coming from more older school offline, I don't say old school, but offline businesses. They weren't born in the cloud, like, a Series C funded tech company or something. And the idea of the website being a big time revenue driver is still a newer one to businesses like that. And so there's a transformation that has to happen there. And you're not going to say, okay, fine, now's the time to go with conversational AI. And, we're going to launch and scope a strategic deployment, from the get, right? You're going to have to start somewhere to deliver the data. And so, there's an assessment that we use at Drift that goes with this to get a sense of like, where are you on this journey? And also there's certain technologies you have to have in place and certain like readiness that we can spot, to make sure that we start you in the right place and kind of meet the buyer where they are, and go forward. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something, we won't get into it today, but this is where, integrations with some of the technologies you're using are really important so that you can maintain that data. But I think, from a PMM perspective, I think, absolutely agree with you, really meeting them where you are. And if you're a business that, as Kyle said, like you're more advanced on the tech side, like you're going to be in a very different place on this this map than if you're just getting started. And I think about your customer base too, right? Like it's ultimately, how do your buyers, what are they asking for as well? And so maybe it's an industry that is starting to get more right into the digital space. So you might not necessarily start right away at advanced, and that's totally fine. I think that's one of the areas that, I love about at least what we do is helping businesses grow, right? As the business grows, right? And to meet the needs. And that's really our core. It really ties to our core philosophy of like meeting the buyers, on their term, this buyer-centric approach. And that's on our buyers, that's on our buyers. And so this just shows, right? You can start at basic, and that's totally fine, because that's where you are. So I love that.
Really, we had a flurry of questions, which is fantastic. So let's take a pause from the prepared content and get into some of these questions if you're down for it.
Yeah, let's do it.
But so Maggie asked, like, how does this work with different countries' data protection laws? Europe has very specific laws, and now with Brexit, we have even more specific laws. So I can feel that one. Maggie, absolutely. So there's a variety of ways that we do that in terms of just being explicit before folks engage with the chat, as to the same kind of disclosures that you would expect to have to use. And we have a law office in London. We operate in EMEA, and we have many customers that are based there. And so we of course comply with all of that, and including like warehousing the data in Europe as well. So there's a variety of things that we do to make sure that we're compliant there. But whether it's Drift or anybody else, you of course have to ask that question. And we're old hand at dealing with that for our partners and our customers in EMEA for sure. And then we have a question from Jam. So do you have any succinct examples for industry, i.e. financial services, auto dealer, apparel, or fashion? So Jam, I understand that question. Are you asking like whether the result, maybe you can help me with that question, but do we need to, I'm going to answer that as if you're asking, do we need to think about AI differently for these different industries and the types of questions that we see? And the answer is yes. I mean, there's certain things that are common between any business that folks will show up and ask on a website, but I think there's obvious difference between just some basic diction, right? Like if we work in healthcare and you can't call things customers, you have to call them like patients and things like that. For our like fintech and finserv companies, there's an entire different like model that we use in order to serve and deliver value quickly with businesses like that. So the idea that if you're buying a conversational AI or looking to build one, do I need to be industry conscious as I'm building and setting that up? Definitely. You need to be company conscious as where you need to build it for that company. But you can also use existing libraries for basic things like affirmations. For example, like in our base model, we have 48 different ways that people say yes to something. Like, yeah, sure, no problem, got it. And that seems silly, but if you want to understand what people are saying in chat, people will say yes to things, they'll say no to things, and you have to have a bunch of different representative examples of how they might express themselves when they're doing that to clearly understand their intent. So there's some libraries that you can access for the basics like that just kind of build you the conversational wherewithal to deploy AI on the site. But then you definitely want to be thinking about kind of an industry specific model as you go to set that up. I hope that answers your questions. And if I haven't, by all means, clarify. We'll take another crack at it. All right.
All right.
And really, can we do one more question?
Yeah.
We have one more from Allison, and really, I'll let you get this one. So it says, can conversational AI be a component in an ABM initiative, helping sales and marketing guide prospects and customers into an appropriate nurture track? I'd have some thoughts on that earlier, but you're on the marketing side. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic for that, because I think you can obviously I understand segment based on who those who your target accounts are. You might have your whale accounts and you have different segments of your target accounts, and use AI to greet those any contact from those accounts in a very specific way to them, right? And from a sales side, your reps will get the assigned rep for that account can get notified right away when anybody's on any contact from that account is on your website so that they can not only know what they're doing, right, and start to understand their intent, they can jump into a conversation if that's the right thing, or based on the stage of where they are in their buying journey, we can enroll them to make into a nurture campaign, right? Making sure we're, as Kyle talked about earlier, recommending the relevant content and the relevant next steps for them, while also just making sure that it's not invisible to sales if that happens, right? So even if we're enrolling them in a nurture sequence that's specific for them, the rep should still be aware, because that is really valuable data for them for when that person is ready to talk to them and keep moving through that experience. So Kyle, I don't know if you want to add a little bit, but more color to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a huge part in an ABM platform and campaign. And one thing you know about, like, if you're going after ABM, presumably it's like larger business. It's typically the more strategic and larger deals within an organization. And those kinds of purchases are going to be more complex. So you might have like 7 or 8 people on a buying committee for a larger kind of purchase that you're hoping to land with your ABM targets. Those folks are going to do, if you believe it, you read a McKinsey, 2/3 of their research before they want to talk to. Excuse me, I've been finding cold the last couple of weeks. So if you can use conversational AI to answer the specific questions from various teams on a buying committee, as you are delivering content to them and like pushing them through a nurture track, that can have an accelerating effect on the way people move through stages of like a demand base or a sixth sense like intent campaign from like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And providing stickiness at those stages, because sometimes accounts will backslide if they don't get good engagement once they do start to show interest. So yeah, absolutely works hand in glove with ABM strategies.
Yeah, Kyle, one thing I just thought of to add as you were talking is like, that's, with that information too, that's obviously when they're inbound asking that one question, I think, which is spot on, like answer that specific question that they have, which is AI can do, right? Because it can understand, it can take free form, but then the sales rep can actually do some more personalized outbounding, right? So it has that like ABM strategy continues, like they can send we have something called Drift Video where we can send a really personalized message based on, what they were doing, the question that they asked or the content they were looking for. And, that's up to the rep to decide what makes sense, but there's a lot that while they're there, engaging them with AI and then using the insights for later to action on, to create more personalization in the different channels that the buyer will be, operating in, because we know it's not just the website every single time, right? There's a lot of different digital channels, but that's sort of the core starting point.
So really, let's get into some of the common use cases. And again, we're gonna focus on value here, because we want to align sales and marketing, but like personalization, there has to be a goal in mind. So how does AI specifically action that alignment and delivery of value? And so I think there's 3 dimensions that make sense broadly to think about. And so first is understanding voice of customer insights. Basically what I would call first party intent of what do people want to talk about when they come to your website based off how they express themselves in chat. We'll talk about that value in a moment. The second one is perhaps the most obvious one is creating more qualified pipeline faster by capturing people at the moment of intent more effectively. And then finally, improving the efficiency to lower the cost of sale. And this is through deflection, basically reducing the amount of noise that is coming through your inbound channel or funnel that has a pesky way of getting onto the calendars and into the lead queues of qualifying teams and inside sales reps. And so AI is good at delivering value across these 3 dimensions. In the next slides, we'll kind of unpack that a little bit. And I look forward to questions as you guys go through this. So let's talk about the voice of customer thing. So AI, and we're thinking about this in the context of just chat experiences that happen generally, but it gives your customers a voice with open text. And you have kind of a guided experience that make it easy for people to engage with you and follow the most common tracks that folks want to talk about when they come to your website. But what if they go off script? And 60% of people who encounter an AI-based chat will do this. They will interrupt the bot and just ask whatever it is they want to ask when given the opportunity to do it, 60%. So it gives you the ability to do that. Now that is valuable, and really, if you could pull me forward, for the intent issue that we asked before. And on the left, We have like, what's your question? And there's 5 questions that are probably in this case statistically proven to be the top 5 questions that people are going to have in this environment, but we don't know for sure. We don't know who this visitor is exactly. We don't know exactly what's on their mind. So we give them an opportunity to interrupt the bot, say what it is. In this case, they ask a question completely out of right field. And if you actually look on the right-hand side, the question the bot asked was, how many employees work at Drift or work at your company? And instead of answering that question, they say, do you integrate with Marketo? And we see evidence of this all the time in the chat transcripts for Drift on Drift and in the transcripts of our customers, where it's utterly unpredictable. In fact, at one point we had mapped 100 consecutive conversations that happened via AI on our own pricing page, and 88 of them took completely different and unique paths through the experience. So there's an 88% chance that whatever you see in chat is going to be unlike anything that you've ever seen before in chat. And that's why you have to create these dynamic experiences and capture this intent. Once you've captured this intent, you will create a database of first-party intent that I would argue is going to be critical for the pending doom that Aurelia hinted at the beginning of this, which is Google no longer allowing third-party cookies for the purposes of targeting. And if I think about what I'm going to do if I can no longer target our buyers or build profiles of our buyers based off of cookies, which is a skill that all of us digital marketers have curated and honed over the past 5 to 10 years, well, what am I going to base it off of? And I think what's great about this idea of first-party chat intent data is that I think it's better than the behavioral data that we've used prior via cookies. It is your actual customers and prospects saying in their own words what they want to talk about it. And so what we're building for the future is this idea of capturing that intent, organizing it, attaching it to the customer profile and the customer record, and then being able to build a what we call like a conversational CRM, or what Accenture would call the customer genome. But it's like, what do these folks care about? Why do they buy what they buy? And then how do the questions that folks ask on a website convert into purchase behavior, retention behavior, content behavior, whatever folks do after the fact. Understanding that and building that database now is the strategy that the most sophisticated organizations are using to equip themselves for a cookieless world, which is looking ever more imminent into the next year. But this is an interesting thing. This is the data value of AI. But Aurelia, what do you think? I want to give you a chance to jump in on this one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you nailed all the key pieces, because I mean, it's just, I feel like it speaks for itself to be able to have this level of data. And I know I've talked about this, but as, you know, a product marketer, I geek out on this because, one, I have to, you know, believe in a product that's really strong, which obviously I do here. But then on the other side of my job is creating the story that's going to resonate. And the best way to create the right stories is listening to your customers in the field, right? That's why product marketing works so closely with sales and CS, right? And with our customers and prospects. And so this is just a way to get that data too, even more so, right? And then we can have so much volume of it and analyze it and create different topics to understand, like, okay, these are the things that people are asking most commonly. Like, are we addressing it the right way? Is our stories, our messaging and positioning the right, you know, the right thing for that? Do we have the right offering from a product perspective? So, you know, I geek out in my role of just so much value of action I can take off of this and use this insights to do. So I'm really excited as we do more and more here. And, you know, Kyle and I can't share all the exciting new stuff we're adding with conversational AI in the coming year, but there'll be a lot on the insights piece, and we are very excited. All right, so you want to tell us about the next big one?
Yeah, let's talk about this one. So, you know, this is the idea of more pipeline or plugging leaks in the website. And, you know, much like personalization, I'll talk to anybody that doesn't want more qualified pipeline from the website. But I do want to be clear about what the mechanism is. And I've analyzed this behavior across hundreds of Drift customers. And what we see in this case is somebody who came to a website and they engaged in chat and they said they wanted to talk to sales. And the chat, like a good chat, asked, that's great. We're offline, but why don't you give us your email address so we can follow up? And instead of giving their email address, the visitor in this case said, how much is this app? And this question I look at a lot on bots that do not have AI, because when you ask somebody for an email address, it's necessarily a free text field. It's often the only one that exists in the playbook experience because they have to enter their own email address at that point. And you see people ask for email addresses all the time. You also see folks abandon the chat this moment, or in this case, finally, when given the chance to express themselves, just blurt their question out. And what I have come to believe to be true is that buyers will not let you qualify them until they have qualified you first. And if we have any digital marketers in the group, they know that, hey, if I have a 3-field form or a 10-field form, my 3-field form is going to get more pull through than my 10-field form. The quality will probably be a little bit lower, but we all know the more stuff we ask for folks, like the less likely they are to complete it. What we're finding is that it's worse than we all thought. Like basically, if you ask anybody for anything, like this is a pretty low bar. It's just an email address. It's not much you have to do here to get the answer. They will not give it. In fact, 50% of people who ask a sales related question in a chat and then find out they need to give an email address to get an answer to it will abandon at that moment. So that is specifically the leak that AI is really good at plugging on business websites. I would love to tell this visitor here in this use case, what the ranges are, or say like we have plans for different companies, tell me more about yourself, to process what a good SDR and inside sales rep would do and replicate that experience. Again, that's all scripted internally. If it can be scripted for a human to do, it can be scripted for a bot to do, or a bot can be trained to behave in the same way. So this is the mechanism for capturing more pipeline. It's basically the folks that they're a question or two away from really wanting to talk to sales. And if we can answer that in real time, then we're going to pull more through. And really, I can tell you've got some thoughts on this. So
yeah, no, and what I love about this insight is, in sales, we say, you have to create value for your buyer before you can, ask them for anything. And this is like, to me, that exact same concept, right there is like visitors need the value. You need to give them something before you can ask for anything. And it's sort of that building trust piece as well, right? And building a little bit of a relationship. Obviously, this is still via chat rather than person to person, but it is very human-like. But I think it's just that concept. And so I love seeing that because it's, it spans across the buying journey, but it's just so true at every stage of it. So.
And then let's talk about the other side of the coin, which is, of course, that, actually, I'll share this example with everybody. Like this is just this in action for Marketo, which uses conversational AI on their website. And you can see like the bot greets them. They give a couple options to proceed. The customer ignores those options and asks questions. And, again, you don't know what they're going to be in ahead of time. You know what they might be statistically, but we don't know what it's going to be for this buyer. And in this case, it was, I'm researching marketing automation platforms. I'm interested in lead scoring, and I want to understand why I would need lead segmentation. And this bot delivered answers to those 3 questions while also probing the customer to learn more about them until finally the customer's wedge questions were satisfied and they did ask to talk to sales. And so it's just an example of what this looks like in the wild for that phenomenon that we were just highlighting on the previous couple slides. So now let's talk about the next one. And this is probably less of a hard-hitting insight than the previous one, but believe it or not, customers will ask for sales when seeking faster service. And we are all trained on this from the IVR systems, the phone systems that are using conversational AI to try to help people when they call a business get to the right information a little bit faster. And the initial versions were incredibly difficult to get somebody on the phone with. And so people just started screaming agent or saying they wanted to buy something so they can get somebody on the phone a little bit faster. So everybody has decades of training of manipulating these systems, and believe it or not, this translates to chat. And so in the example on the left-hand side here, you see somebody who, again, showed up to the website, said they wanted to talk to sales, and then when they got the salesperson connected into a live conversation, they said, is there a way to change my monthly subscription? Clearly an existing customer, clearly interested in buying something and trying to, in fact, downgrade the service, which is not an ideal use of the salesperson's time. So this is one way that we create more rep productivity. The other way is actually through the use case that we covered previously, where if we're capturing meetings and data and leads and qualifying them live on the site, even if that person were to convert via a form instead of a chat, and that the rep still has to follow up. Like they might have to make 6 to 10 activities to take a completed lead form and convert that into a meeting versus them just booking a meeting straight away on the website. So if it is a good lead, if it is a bad lead, either way, there's qualification activities that come with that. And by better converting at the moment of intent and better deflecting support or unqualified site traffic, that is the mechanism for increasing rep productivity and reducing the noise in those inbound channels.
Yeah, and I think, that's so huge, right? Because sellers, especially now too, like I think they get like 5% of a buyer's time, and sales is so hard. And anything to help them actually focus their time on just opportunities that are actually qualified and ready to talk to them. And on the flip side of it, not only is this helping with the rep productivity, but the customer can get the experience that they want. So if we route them to the support agent or create a ticket, they're going to get the information and answer that they need, right? So it's creating a good experience for the customer. And it just takes me back to the slide earlier, Kyle, when you were starting with the who, right? And again, you greet them, but then it's understanding what do they need. And this is such a great example of understanding and then taking the right action and recommendation based on that piece. I know we have an example here of this in action a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. This is Zenefits. Zenefits, they're an HR platform, as you might know. And right around tax time in the spring in the US every year, they have a ton of people showing up asking where to find their W-2s and other questions like that. Now, this is a sales and marketing design experience. This is here to try to qualify and route leads to the sales organization. But we have these wayward customers that have questions like that all the time. And if we don't answer this question, they may loop back in, say they want to talk to somebody just to get an answer. Or we could say, go talk to support or call your HR department. They're the best person to answer this for you. Neither of those are really great customer experiences. So in these kinds of cases, the best thing we can do is literally just answer the question, just give them bullet points related information directly in line in the chat to make sure that they don't end up on the sales calendars, they don't have a bad experience, and we don't just kick the can down the road to the support organization. And that's how we use kind of this better buying experience or customer service experience to align the sales and marketing teams, allowing them to offer these experiences everywhere and making sure that conversations like this don't end up with the sales organization. And I think we covered this already. So I think it's the end of our prepared content. So, we go to some takeaways here. I know we've talked a lot. Paul, I'd be curious to hear what you've been thinking about as we've been going through this. If there's anything else from the group to chime in, but I think, for me, the big takeaway through all of this is to think about the actual source of the disconnect between the sales and marketing organizations. And I think the people get along. I think everybody wants more revenue and pipeline these days. And so we position Drift or Conversational AI as the dynamic personalization engine that exists on what is otherwise the least personalized aspect of the buyer's journey, which is the website. And if we can represent the qualification interests from the sales organization and the continuity interests from the marketing organization and the path that brought them there, and do that with a great customer experience that's personalized in between, that's what we view as the strategy that wins in the modern B2B buying environment. So that's my takeaway, or how I would summarize that. I don't know, Aurelia, what do you think? And then Paul, love to hear from you too.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is the insights that we learn, that conversational AI from having those free text conversations at any time with our buyers, and really understanding their intent is really the way to, is the future of how we personalize from the sales motion, the marketing experience, and that buyer experience across all the channels. And I think, as you said, the website is, as you think about conversational AI, that it is that meeting point. It is the most important place. And something, as a marketer, we think about, how many marketers, on the call right now, I'm sure you've gone through many different website updates. I know we have at Drift, right? And I think as I think about, basic, generic, advanced, strategic, it doesn't mean you need to wait for this big overhaul of a website or doing everything all at once. There's steps to this depending on where you are. And so, as just keeping a focus though on the website and making sure that it's not just something that the marketing team thinks about and is has the data on, but that your sales team, using AI can get those insights as well. That's the key of bringing those two teams together to create that experience, to accelerate your pipeline, your revenue, and obviously all of that is a great experience, at the same time creating that really great experience for your customer. So I think that's my big takeaway. And Paul, I'd love to hear from you.
My big takeaway is we have a bunch of questions. So we're going to I'm going to do a rapid fire. We have 5 minutes to answer. Let's try and get 7 of these in. All right. So these are going to be really quick. Lots of, one, there's like a wealth of knowledge and information. So thank you. The critical aspect that kept coming up is the need for all this data, whether the AI is helping analyze all these conversations or just the conversations or raw data are coming in. How does Drift work with CRMs to make that information accessible and usable for marketing and sales? So is there out of the box integrations, or how does that work?
Yes, we do have integrations with bidirectional with CRMs. So I'll give an example, and using Salesforce, that's a predominant one that a lot of people are on, but also HubSpot and others. But we actually have a conversation object. So you pull all that conversation data straight into Salesforce, and it's updated in real time. And that makes it really easy to do any reporting that you might want to off of it, right? And create some new ones. But that is a key piece. And that's a little bit of what Kyle and I were talking about earlier, that, having those connections to those technologies like a CRM is really important also for the targeting and how you have already segmented your target audience, prospects and customer base, to be able to use that as well to create those personalized experiences on the website.
I know you talked a lot about natural language understanding, natural language processing. And so if people aren't familiar with what exactly that means or how it works, if you have dozens of these conversations in a month, it's almost impossible for the team of humans to understand and process all the information in there. And so one of the other ways AI can really play a role is as you scale up conversation on your site and you have, thousands of words or tens of thousands of words of chat each month, the AI can help understand what's happening within that. It can look for patterns. It can, look at tone and sentiment, and it can unlock all kinds of information that your marketing and sales teams can be using. That if you're just using a straight up chat bot that has no AI in it, it's just going to be words, and you're not going to be able to act on any of that data. So that's one of the other key aspects of AI. Minimum number of users or monthly chats where it makes sense to get into that advanced to strategic buckets that you were talking about, Kyle. Are there minimums that you look at as value being able to be extracted on either end?
I think about it, and I think the number one thing that correlates is volume, frankly, and volume of site visitors. So if you are getting over, say, 50 to 60,000 sessions on your website a month, then you're getting the kind of volume where it's going to start to make sense to think about conversational AI on your site. So that's one dimension. Another thing I heard in there is like, how many chats do I need? Or Allison asked a question around like, how does sales and marketing get together to understand the questions? And the answer is actually the same to both those questions. Is you use the chat, like you take a test to learn approach, where you can like start with chat, maybe even using scripted chat with sales support to have live conversations. And you can analyze those conversations or use our classifier to do it and we'll tell you, and we'll be able to just like ingest those conversations and say, hey, here's the top 40 questions that people have when they come to the site. And that usually takes about 500 human to human conversations before you can start to build a model that would give you some pretty good understanding there.
And kind of unrelated, there was a question around what percentage of people, if there is a benchmark in any way, will use a chat. So if you have 50, 60,000 users, do you have a formula that you would say, on average, you're probably going to get 1,000 chats a month? Do you have any kind of benchmark data on that?
Yeah, I talk about this a lot. So the benchmark is about between 1% and 2% of people who see chat are going to engage with it. So you can, in your business, say 1.2 to 1.5% of folks on average are going to talk to a chat when they see it.
And does that number go up relevant to your 4 buckets, that as you personalize more, that that number actually increases relative to it?
Directly correlated, because at the moment, like when someone clicks on a chat to talk to it, at that moment, they don't know that it's going to be this awesome AI-based experience. All they see is a sentence, and it's like the subject line of an email address. And so if I have, segmented email lists, and I can send a subject line that's directly relevant to somebody, I'm more likely to click and open that email, and chat works the exact same way. So if I have, it's just a function of that. It actually has like very little to do with AI and more with how personalized we've created our audiences, and then how we built chat experiences to address them.
And I expect that 1 to 2 to go up as we look at the demographic changes, right, of the generations who will start moving into the business buying roles. They are tech savvy. They only knew internet. They never knew a time before. Everything is digital for them. So I don't have the number top of mind, like hand on the exact numbers, but I expect that 1 to 2 to certainly increase over time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I agree 100%. Well, I mean, I literally have like a dozen more questions, but we are at the end of the hour. So I don't know, we may have to do this again, come back and answer some more questions, or maybe we'll do a podcast or something. So thank you both for being here. Thank you to everybody. I mean, almost everybody who joined is actually still on the call. So that's great. Hopefully you've all found this really valuable. The Drift does have their Rev Growth virtual event coming up, so check that out. There's a link in the chat. We'll send that in the follow-up with the on-demand access. So we will send you on-demand access for everything as well. So Kyle and Aurelia, thank you so much for your time and for the knowledge. We really appreciate it. And our partnership with Drift, has been great, and look to continue working with both of you moving forward. And thanks again to everybody who was here today.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks to the team, and thanks to everybody who attended. Appreciate it.
Talk to you soon. Thanks again.
Bye.